Hey guys, welcome to the newest episode of the SaaS Sessions podcast. Today we have Francois Kulik on the show. Francois is currently heading the global pipeline generation at Algolia. Algolia helps businesses across industries quickly create relevant, scalable, lightning fast search and discovery experiences. Prior to Algolia, Francois used to work with companies like SAP, Workday, and Salesforce, to name a few. Francois, such a pleasure to have you on the show. I'm thinking that I'm spelling your name correctly.
Yeah, that's
It's
a
right.
difficult one. Yes, that is
Yay.
right. François, that's perfect.
Nice.
Don't worry if you get it wrong a couple of times. That's fine.
Yeah. So yeah, Francois, can you tell us a bit more about you in your words and how has your journey been into the SaaS ecosystem?
Sure. So as you're probably gonna catch from my accent, I'm half French, half Irish. So there's a bit
Mm-hmm.
of both in the accent,
Nice.
depending on how tired I am. But yeah, so I've been working in the IT industry and especially the cloud industry very quickly in my career. So
Mm-hmm.
started first in the IT, working for what was at the time a startup outsourcing company doing renewal and maintenance for various IT customers called Service
Mm-hmm.
Source. That grew, and I had the chance to go through the exciting and yet tiring part of like going through a startup that is growing to 20, 50, 100 million, then IPO, then post IPO restructuration and everything. So that's kind of good, and that's where I got my taste of moving from different departments. I've been in the sales
Mm-hmm.
department, I've been in the operation department, I've been in the strategy department. That was really a journey for that. And then
Mm-hmm.
from then on, I thought that I would jump to a bigger company. I might have overshoot it a little bit because I went to
Mm-hmm.
Oracle, which is a big difference between a startup and Oracle, right? But
Uh-huh.
yeah, so started discovering the world of business development and really found that it was a perfect mix of my experience between operation and strategy and understanding what is a go-to-market.
Mm-hmm.
How do you really steer a business to get the maximum result out of it? And
Mm-hmm.
then the sales part that I had all through my career as well, because it is the beginning of a sales part. So I've done
Right.
a couple of things, and I mean, I suppose I've navigated between the operation strategy parts, the
Mm-hmm.
go-to-market part, and the pure business development, even inside sales. Going through this kind of like how do you make use of all the technology to drive a sales cycle? I've done that at Oracle, then I moved on to Salesforce. There was a sort of a migration at
Mm-hmm.
some point around 2012, 13, if you remember well,
Uh-huh.
and I follow a lot of my peers going into Salesforce, had great experience there. Then had the chance to work for Workday, which is an amazing product and a very fast growth company as well,
Yeah.
with a very different proposal. And then after that, I've been working for SAP, not SAP itself, but like, well, it was SAP, but it's the ERP cloud that they're developing. Super
Mm-hmm.
innovative. Joined a couple of my ex-colleague of
Mm-hmm.
Salesforce, most notably Melissa Di Donato, who was the CRO of there at the time, and growing a very niche and amazing business of ERP cloud. And
Mm-hmm.
then had the occasion to join Algolia in 2019,
Nice.
joining the CRO there. That was an ex-Salesforce as well. So there's a bit of a connection
Nice.
there.
Mm-hmm.
And Algolia is really amazing in terms of what they do. And that brings me back to my roots. It's
Yeah.
not totally a startup because they're already quite big, nicely, but in terms of philosophy, it's probably closer to my roots. So it's
Yeah.
kind of a loop there. So that's it, me in a few words.
Nice. Nice. I think Algolia is would be a good fit for you. You get the startup taste as well, and then you get the enterprisey taste as well. So I think it's like a sweet spot that you have got for yourself.
It is,
Uh,
and I think people don't realize that you can also be, even when you're in a big corporation, even when you're in a Workday and SAP and everything, you can keep that
mm-hmm.
mindset to drive things that are a little bit more project based. When I was
Mm-hmm.
talking about SAP, it was a little bit smaller projects, smaller part of the revenue. Same thing for Salesforce, right? We're talking about developing enterprise for Europe. You can take that as a
Uh-huh.
as a project as well. So
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
that's how you can keep it.
Yeah. talking about Algolia, right? So you're currently managing or you're currently heading the global pipeline generation for Algolia. So that's like managing a whole BD team, right? So walk us through what happens at your day and what is exactly like managing the global pipeline generation.
Yeah, so as many company, we have a dedicated business development team that is separated. It's not hybrid, it's separated between inbound and outbound,
Uh-huh.
which is a conscious choice, I think.
Yeah.
And we cover the entire world through a couple of centers. We have people in Atlanta, Georgia, in the US. We have
Mm-hmm.
people in London. We have people in Paris. It's a little bit, and we have offices as well. Other offices in New York and San Francisco and other places,
Mm-hmm.
Japan as well, and Australia. Oh no, we don't have Australia. Sorry, Japan is the place where we have people for the region. The the growth of that organization is obviously vital for the pipeline, but also for capturing the talents that we need at Algolia to continue our growth. So that's something that is super important and that receive a lot of attention within Algolia itself.
Interesting. So how has COVID affected pipeline generation at Algolia?
In waves,
Huh?
in waves. It's so I suppose I prepared myself when we were getting the first news about the COVID. I was also, it was at the time also what I thought that the a recession was overdue. So it's kind of like I was bracing myself. I
Mm-hmm.
lived. I don't. I am not that old, but I had the experience of the 2008 recession, 2009, and living in Ireland. We've been hit quite hard, like
Mm-hmm.
really, really hard. Working for an American company in IT, you know the damage that it did, and I was bracing myself for kind of the same reaction, trying
Mm-hmm.
to think about how I was doing, and then I realized that it was actually very, very different in the sense that it was really affecting industries very differently. So it was affecting regions differently. So we had the first impact was in Europe before it was
Uh-huh.
in the US. It
Yeah.
was affecting it in a very different, it's not as deep as a recession,
Uh-huh.
but it's places where I realized that the key for it was to be listening to every single situation for our customer and our prospect. Because there's
Mm-hmm.
not one reality, right? We
Right.
we work a lot with retailers. Some retailers were thriving, some retailers were having trouble, some retailers were having massive troubles. In some cases, we had to be there with them
Mm-hmm.
to help them make things better. In some cases, we were there to help them capture the opportunities that was in front of them. It's kind of a dual thing, but I think what I've learned is that there was not one blanket solution like there could have been in 2008. And it
Right.
was a lot more. And then we're talking about just the retail, but we're also covering like media and publisher and all this
Got
other
it.
industry.
Yeah.
It's really different.
Yeah. And then difference in between inbound and outbound since you're managing both at Algolia, right? So was
Mhm.
the effect of COVID on inbound and was the effect of COVID on outbound? Was it the same or, was it different in between those two?
Yeah, so I think we're lucky enough to live in the bubble, the fast growth company, and I'm the first one to admit that, right?
Uh-huh.
So within the time frame that we got COVID impacting, might have had an impact, but we also have had a lot of improvement in our because it's a SaaS business, a cloud product, so we
Yeah.
had a lot of functionalities that were added. We implemented a new model for the customer to capture the value in terms of pricing and everything. So I'm not sure what was the impact of COVID because we had ups and downs based out of
Uh-huh.
that. So when we had a feature like we had a big push in personalization
Mm-hmm.
and artificial intelligence and stuff like this, it's it pushed the business and the inbound level up. And
Uh-huh.
then you have the impact of recession or recession like conditions and COVID, and it pushed the business down. So what I would say it does though is that instead of looking at the number of our inbounds every month or on on a rolling basis,
Mm-hmm.
every week I'm looking at how much inbounds we receive, and I'm working a lot closer to marketing than I ever did before. And we really
Mm-hmm.
take the level of inbounds at heart, and we make sure that it never drops because, it's more
Uh-huh.
fluctuating.
Great. And then when you mentioned you worked at with marketing team closer than ever before. So what was it like? What was the collaboration with the marketing team, right? Because sales and marketing coordination is a one big issue in many companies. And I've spoken to many people and they see this kind of issue at their end. So what was the collaboration that you were doing when you say you were working with the marketing team closely than ever before? Can you give us like a
Um,
few examples?
you know what? I'll be candid. I had to learn to work with marketing. Coming from the sales world, you say it,
Exactly, yeah.
sales is always, well, sales is having problem with many of the departments, but in terms of marketing, there's always this thing between sales and marketing. We need
Uh-huh.
each other, and yet,
Yeah.
conflict of interest sometimes put a
Yeah.
little wall between us. So coming from that side, I always had to learn to do that, and I feel like over the years I did, and the culmination of that is that, I'm very comfortable in working with marketing now at Algolia, and what
Mm-hmm.
it does is that it creates a speed that you can't have otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
It's super important for people to realize that as business development, whether you're inbound or outbound, you're still at the kind of middle to end of the process for marketing and the beginning to middle in sales.
Exactly,
And
yeah.
if you
Mm-hmm.
don't really take at heart that, you have to collaborate every single day, you're not going to be fast enough. That means that when
Totally.
you have something that doesn't work, that you have a type of inbound that doesn't produce results, or that you have a type of MQL criteria that is
Mm-hmm.
not relevant, or any type of gap, things that we should capture and we don't. If
Uh-huh.
you don't have the right channel of communication, you won't be able to communicate that very quickly. They won't be able to solve it for you.
Totally.
That's one thing, that's the number of communication. And then what I've learned as well is that understanding the language. So
Uh-huh.
I'm in many meetings with marketings now, and what I learned is that there's a lot of things that I oversimplified in my limited understanding of what marketing is doing. I think
Mm-hmm.
we're all kind of doing that when we try to understand something. We simplify it. And I
Right.
didn't learn to speak their languages. And when they're explaining to me why something could not be done or something could be done and I should do it, I don't automatically, I didn't automatically and understood everything they wanted to do. And
Right.
now that I'm working closer with them, I understand very quickly what they mean and why it's important for them and when it could be important for me. So
Totally.
if I was going back 10 years and giving advice to my younger self,
Yeah.
I would definitely give that advice, listen to marketing a bit more.
That's really great. And I'm glad that you work with marketing team closer than ever before. I mean, I'm a marketer and we also have a very healthy collaboration with our outbound and inbound team and plus the sales team. So it kind of creates a healthy relationship because everyone is benefiting from everyone else. And
Hmm.
it's the more collaboration and the more communication that you have in between all these three teams, which is the sales, the business development, and the marketing team, the more better all these three teams can function, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, and then talking about Algolia and COVID, right? And then global pipeline generation at Algolia. So how was the first 6 months where the majority of the COVID affected, right? And then the next 6 months, which currently we are in. So how has that changed? As in, like the first 6 months was we are just adapting to the new normal, which we were not sure of how it's gonna be. But I think now people and companies have started to adjust to the new normal, and they have started like adapting to this kind of world that we are currently living in. So how has it affected in the pipeline for you guys? Like the first 6 months versus the next 6 months, and what are your plans for that, right? So I see many companies battling between should they focus on demand or should they focus on brand. I mean, demand and brand drives each other. That's true. But then what is the focus for Algolia like?
So, I think I mentioned it before, but it forced us to really double down on listening to the prospect and our customers.
Uh-huh.
That's really something that is common, that is really, really clear. And I think everybody had to do it.
Mm-hmm.
We had the chance to perhaps be at the stage of our growth where it was a little bit more natural to do it,
Mm-hmm.
because we're still developing the product at a very fast pace. So, you
Right.
absolutely have to listen to the customer no matter what.
Totally.
Um, the 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 thing that became super important is to make sure that you have a collaboration in terms of developing the value. So
Makes
that's
sense.
something
Mm-hmm.
that in the good time you can lose track of the value. Hey, we started like, I don't know for you actually, I shouldn't assume that, but I started my career when, it was the tail end of the time where you could ship a CD-ROM with the software. And
Yeah.
your role was
Yeah.
almost stopping there, right, for the next 5 years. And you had
Yeah.
the 20% maintenance and support that was
Right.
there. And the value conversation was a lot less important, or at least it was important, but it wasn't lasting the entire life of a customer cycle.
Yeah, makes
Um,
sense.
Now, value is more important with the cloud model and with innovative products. But
Yeah.
in a pandemic crisis or acute downturn, all this situation where it's a little bit more unstable, then value becomes the heart of everything you do. How can I
Exactly.
provide more value to my customer? How can I present the value as a business marketer or marketing person? How can I make sure that the person I'm talking to understand the value of it? And the value could be different for every person you talk to, depending on who you talk to. The value might be to speed up the process. The value might be to make more money. The value might be to simplify their operation. But you have to really put the value in the middle of everything. So as I
Mm-hmm.
think about, the first few months, we had really this focus on value. As I look into the next 6 months, I'm really hoping that we can capture everything we learned on the first 6 months by focusing more on the value and transforming that into something that is valuable in our product, in our messaging,
Right.
and sometimes, just take how our customer are using us and make sure that, we transform that into something repeatable for the industry.
Makes sense. And then talking about the next 6 months, right? So that really comes from your experience for the first half of the year, in which we saw the world turn upside down, right? So
Mhm.
and then since you're running the pipeline, global pipeline generation, also might have to predict, right? So you would have started with the year with some numbers that you had in mind, that this is the numbers that we're going to hit, and this
Mhm.
is the percentage that we expect to grow, right? So how has that changed, from the first half of the year to the second half of the year?
Yeah, so look, being a private company, I'm not going to be able to comment too much on the level of
Yeah, for
of
sure. Mm-hmm.
target we give and everything. But
Yeah.
the one thing that I can comment on is that there's a human aspect to that, and that's
Mm-hmm.
the one that we focused a lot in I know in my department in business development. My worry was always, as if I give a target to someone, can they actually make it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And at that point what we did, to make sure that we can reconcile both the fact that the market was a little bit harder, especially, you
Right.
had somebody covering Italy when, Italy was a little bit more challenging and everything.
Yeah.
The point is, how can we make sure that we give them enough to be able to be successful? So that's on our
Exactly.
side, is like, how do we make sure we're in full growth? So territory should never be something that is too small, right?
Right.
We have the world
Yeah.
in front of you. This is quite a large market. So if we put some care, we should be able to give them enough to work. And that's kind of how we moved, not by reducing automatically the expectations we had, but by making sure that everybody had enough tools and enough territory to achieve it. And that's something that is a little bit complex to do. It requires
Mm-hmm.
as you said, you had expectations at the beginning of a year, and
Right.
then all of a sudden you have to reshape them and making sure that everybody has enough. And then, funny enough, we're also part of that equation for the sales team.
Uh-huh.
because with the business being a little bit more difficult, and some conversation that fall through because the company is not investing or the budgets are reduced or stuff like this, we also as business development need to make sure that we double down on opening this conversation, because we
Right.
want to give VAEs the ability to perform as well.
Right. Exactly.
And we do
Mm-hmm.
that by looking at the right place, but
Right.
by not chasing things that will not happen in the first half of a year.
Right. Mm-hmm. So
So that's we're both part of the problem and the solution.
yeah, totally. And I can understand, like, having a predictability of sorts into different target accounts or, your prospects, that's really some a challenging thing. And plus, as you mentioned in the start, different parts of world were affected in different ways. So it would have been really challenging for you to decide the targets for each and every individual who's catering to a different region, right? So I can I can imagine those conversations you're having with the team when certain part of the world that they're managing is facing a big crisis, and someone else who is managing a different part of the world where there is not so much of a crisis situation. Yeah.
Yeah, and listen, this is something that you have to have even when there's no crisis, right? Coronavirus is very special.
Yeah.
It amplifies everything. But I always, we have the advantage when you're covering a very diverse market, whether it's Asia or whether it's Europe,
Uh-huh.
or if you have global roles, is that you always have to balance that. You know that you're going to get no business in July for
Mm-hmm.
the Nordics European country. You know you're going to have no business in other time of the year. You know
Yeah.
that your Q4 in Europe is not the Q4 and
US.
the increase in Australia, for example,
Mm-hmm.
because of the thing, or so that's kind of a thing that you need to
Definitely.
learn to manage and balance, because otherwise you have too many weak points and or weak period in your production of pipeline.
Definitely. And yeah, taking from there, right? The prediction of pipeline. So what is the campaign that worked for you the best? And what is like one campaign that you can think of that didn't work for you as much as you expected it would?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's more in terms of like where do we grow and how we grow that was a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more difficult to predict, right?
Right.
And at the end of the day, we're doing well, but it's never where you expect it. So we got a slowdown first in Europe, and then we got a slowdown then in the US, and that's kind of the things that I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't have. And then
Yeah.
everybody came back more or less to normal. And I know that talking to some colleagues that have more exposure even to, like, for example, China, the ERP world, that are working with more like heavy industry in China, they said they have seen the three waves. They basically had like a slowdown in China, then it came back up, then it had the slowdown in Europe, and it came back up, and it had the slowdown in the US, and they came back up.
Came back up. Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm preparing myself to have this always, right? So I try to
Right.
keep a baseline, but I'm not banking on any region being stable till
Mm-hmm.
the end of the year.
Totally.
But I am more or less optimistic though. I think we can, like, the new normal, if you're working in the industries that are adapting to COVID. And when I talk to some of I'm the executive sponsor for a few of our clients, and when I hear how innovative and how they react to the crisis,
Mm-hmm.
I'm amazed, and that gives me a great hope that actually, we're gonna make it. We're not gonna
Mm-hmm.
let that being a horrible event that stops everything. I mean, our
Totally.
clients, I talk to them, and they're finding ways to do business, and they find ways to even improve the service they give to their clients.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
that is not the same as a recession where it's mechanical. There's a lack of money everywhere. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard in places, absolutely. I don't want to really take light the hardship of people that are out of job and that are struggling. But in terms of a global economy, I think we need to make sure to find the solution to make it continue through the year and next.
Definitely. And I think this was a good teaching that COVID had on you, I guess. And talking about teachings, like, so COVID has been good and bad in many ways for each and every individual and each and every business, right? So if talking about the good part, right? So what was something that COVID taught you personally about your job that you're gonna carry in, for the rest of your life? So what are maybe couple of things that COVID has given back to you so that you can do your job better?
So the learnings that I would have,
Yeah,
it's something that I think I had at the very beginning of my career, and you lose a little bit as you get more and more people reporting to you and everything. Is that the importance of every single person that is working in your team?
sure.
That's kind of make you think of that. You tend after that, when you get more people under management or that you interact with, you tend
Mm-hmm.
to see people as group because you have to solve things as a group, right? You try to solve the question of
Makes sense.
maternity leave and sick leave and underperformance, and you kind of
Mm-hmm.
tend to put people into it and solve the problem, which is good. But
Right.
if you do that too long, then you stop listening to the people that actually have the problem. And what I
Exactly.
found, Algolia especially has they have as one of a value to really be candid, right? And
Yep.
that's a weird thing to say, but that means, I was in a meeting yesterday where the or head of HR or chief people officer was actually asking people, that was in that case parents, to
Mm-hmm.
just vent what they found difficult. No,
Mm-hmm.
no, propose new thing, or just tell me your ideas or how to make it better. And it's just like, just tell me why you're fed up.
Yeah.
It could be about Algolia, it could be against the government or anything,
Yeah.
but obviously relative to something that is useful for
Nice.
for us in terms of that.
Yeah.
You know what? You learn sometimes a lot more in asking people what they feel as
Uh-huh.
individual, because there are solutions that are there that are coming from 1 or 2 person venting, but after that, when you propose a solution based on that, it actually fits the
Totally.
larger amount of people. If you were
Mm-hmm.
asking people to come up with things for the larger amount of people, they wouldn't have, thought about that automatically. Now, it's a cultural thing, right? And it's not easy to keep. So I think, wherever I am, I'm just doing that. And knowing that I'm a
Mm-hmm.
father of 4 kids, I'm going to try to do that at home as well, although not too much,
Right.
but,
Mm-hmm.
just, just a little bit of that.
Makes sense. That's a really great learning, right? And I hope you would be thankful in a way to COVID that you had this learning before, but then it kind of reminded you it to you again. And yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. So yeah, I think we have reached the course for this episode, Francois, and it's been really interesting talking with you about generating a global pipeline for a company like Algolia in such a uncertain world or uncertain situation. It's really amazing, right? And I'm sure you would have amazing insights there and for everyone. So I'm gonna move on to the next round, which is the lightning round. So I have
Nice.
like three lightning questions for you, one of which you already answered, which was so first one was what would you know about your work now that you would have known when you first started? And I think you answered that already.
See, yeah, absolutely. Be nice to marketing.
Yeah. Nice. So then I'm gonna move to the second one. So like, what did your biggest professional failure teach you?
Biggest professional failure. The one thing that I regret is when I did the transition. So I've had companies, I have the chance to work for companies that were very, very good and that had strong cultures and everything. And I suppose at the early stage of my career, I thought that because you were able to create a team with a certain culture within a certain company, I could
Mm-hmm.
go in another company and use exactly the same blueprint
Mm-hmm.
because the previous company had a great culture. And I thought, if it worked there, it will work in the next company.
Nice. Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest failure is when I realized, whoa, no, that just doesn't work like this. And then I realized that, people were absolutely not receptive to that. And that's where I realized that culture is not something that you put and decide to adopt.
Yeah,
uh, it's something that you actually craft from what already exists and what people are,
totally.
feeling.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing, because that opens my eyes to a lot, and that was a
Mhm.
failure, because I had to actually almost like backtrack after like 3 or 4 or 5 weeks in the job, just moving back and saying, okay, now I'm just gonna just step back,
Mhm.
forget everything I know, and re-engage. And it took obviously a lot longer than I thought it would be otherwise.
Totally. And then moving on to the next one, like what's the number one thing that has helped you shorten your learning curve?
So something that's helped me shortening the learning curve, mentors. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, absolutely. And I know it's a little bit easy because I'm working in a hub, in a
Mm-hmm.
hub, in the sense that Dublin has most of the headquarters for Europe. That
Mm-hmm.
means you get to a network of people that are highly successful, and you get a lot of people. But I have to say, the mentors are the people that really gave me solutions that I would have never thought in a million years. It's
Nice.
not,
Mm-hmm.
it's there are the people who will give you something that is not accessible by incremental learning. So it's not
Yeah,
even accelerating, is that my learning and my train of thoughts, even if that train of thought was getting 10% better, incrementally better year after year, I would have never achieved the solution.
makes
And
sense.
that person that I'm talking to is giving me a solution that kind of completely stopped my incremental learning and pushed me on another path, which is the right path.
That
And
is really
there's like
interesting.
four or
Mm-hmm.
five people that are like this that I attach myself to and that I always come back to.
That's really interesting. I mean, this was the main reason I started this podcast. I mean, I want to learn about something. I talk to people and I learn it. I mean, yeah, that's the most that's the best way. At least it has helped me, and I think it has helped you as well. Though you're not recording it and you're not putting it on a podcast, but
No,
essentially it's it's the same.
no.
It's really interesting. And since you had already answered the first question of the lightning round while we were talking, I have another question for you, right? Um,
It doesn't sound fair. That's like changing the target mid-quarter. You don't do that. Okay,
yeah.
fair enough. Go ahead. Hit me.
Yeah. No, I just want to piggyback on what your chief people officer did, and then want to ask you that, is there something that you want to vent about? Like, what's the one thing that's currently troubling you?
Ah, Uh, I'm going to share you something that I said, and that's. I mean, we're going to the sphere of being a parent during the
Uh-huh.
pandemic, and I am a parent, 4 kids, all under 10. A real
No.
Irish family. I think there's one thing that really bugged me, is that we went very quickly from enjoying the fact that we had a little bit more time in the day because we're not going to the office and we're more
Yeah.
efficient and everything. And we started taking the time that was the commuting time
Mm-hmm.
as time that is okay to fill with meeting and everything. And we forgot that there are people who are parents, or people who, even I say parents, it could be people who have responsibility on the side, that are caring for an elderly, that are
Mm-hmm.
that are could do, or even volunteering or whatever it is. But we can't start filling the day without the understanding that people have things before and after work as well. And we need to
Totally.
make sure that we're being absolutely listening to the people and not fill this time that we save with more work. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, it's great to be able to do a bit more work. We have a big challenge in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose we all work a tiny bit harder to make sure that the uncertainty is not hitting us. And
Totally.
as respect of this situation as well, we're lucky to have jobs, or being employable, and we need to respect that. But do not, use that as, removing that commuting time and transforming that
Yeah.
into meeting time.
Totally. That totally makes sense. And I think people have started living at their workplace now, or working at their living place now, however you
Yes,
want to call it.
absolutely.
So yeah, that's really hard for like many people out there, but I think it's just some time before we started adapting to this lifestyle as well. So I think we'll get there. So
I think we will. I think we will.
yeah. Great. So yeah, thanks a lot, Francois. And it's been really amazing speaking with you. And thank you for sharing all these amazing insights with us today.
That's pleasure is shared. It was a pleasure
Yeah.
to answer your questions.